Welcome back, everyone. This is Cassie from the Always Believer podcast, season 2. I'm one of the co hosts with Ariadna, and today I'm sitting down with my sister, Lenise, to have a conversation about just growing up in a small town and being able to go out and live in the world. Hello, Lenny. How's it going?
Hi, Cassie. It's going well. How are you?
Good. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and getting through college to like where you wanted to be at when you finished college.
So you and we both grew up in a small town called Mount Pleasant, Pennsylvania, which southwestern PA, and pretty normal upbringing. You know, we have one other sister as well, so 3 girls. And I went to a school, which it's funny, it was a state school. It's called California University of Pennsylvania, and I currently live in California. So when I tell people that, they're like, "What?" But at that time, I wanted to be a teacher. I just knew that I wanted some impact, and I saw myself, pursuing teaching and ending up probably on the East Coast, maybe either in Pennsylvania, in the Carolinas, something like that. But going through school, there was one certain credential test that I needed to pass, and I actually failed it, I think 5 or 6 times, which was just one door closing. Was one door closing. So that's why I just got a degree in mathematics. So when I was graduating college, I wasn't specifically sure where I'd end up, but enter you and new opportunities.
Yeah, so you didn't pass the praxis and you were still just living in Mount Pleasant, hanging with a bunch of people still in Mount Pleasant, living at home. I was getting ready to go to my second tour, which was out of Sasebo, Japan. I got stationed on worship out there. And I said, well, why don't you come out and see how it goes? And you can try 90 days and then we'll see if we can get you a residency. But we weren't even sure if we were going to be able to do that.
Correct. And that's actually, you're not supposed to recommend that to people. You don't just like show up and be like, "I'm here," but that's definitely what I did do. And I just really knew after what unfolded, we were kind of uncertain for a month or two, but I knew I was in the right place at the right time and I was exactly where I should be. And I can't thank you enough for having that vision of the future to like kind of get me out of that hometown. You just don't know what you don't know. So at the time I was having so much fun living it up, but that's not where I would want to be now. So thanks to you for throwing me a life vessel and get me out of there.
I mean, we were definitely flying by the seat of our pants because I found out very quickly that I fell under the status of forces agreement, which is where I can come and go from Japan as I please. Whereas when you're on a tourist visa, you don't have those same luxuries. So we planned a trip to go to Korea. We decided to go visit Seoul like a couple weeks after you arrived. And then basically we came back after that weekend and they weren't going to let us back. They weren't going to let you back into Japan because it turns out like when you have a tourist visa, if you leave the country, that actually voids the rest of the time on the tourist visa. But because we had gone so soon into you getting that, they actually ended up like we couldn't really communicate, but like they ended up restamping it for us, which was like a miraculous event, I feel like, because they did not have to, at that point, they did not have to let you in, but we were just like pleading with them, like, please don't kick her out completely.
Yeah, I think it was like they were considering, should they give me another 90 days? Like, you're not supposed to leave after 90 days and then come right back and get another 90 days. Some people try to do that. And in some other countries, I think you can get away with it. But luckily, we had a friend there, Ben, who was with us, and he could speak a little Japanese. And he was like, "Oh, no, please let her in." And that was actually a very pivotal moment. I remember sitting in the terminal when we got in, and I got an email from the job that I had applied for. And they told me that I had gotten the job, and I knew right then, I was like, my life has changed. I don't have to leave. I'm going to be here. I'm going to get the visa. And I just remember like the stress that was taken away at that time, and just so thankful for that opportunity and the chance to stay.
And we actually had a really good time because we were just kind of, so the kind of dynamic of living in Japan is that the military there is forward deployed. So the ships themselves are at sea the majority of the time. Like usually you're not in a maintenance period, but I arrived when the ship was at the end of a maintenance period. So I was spending 90 days at a time underway, often, down in Southeast Asia and in Australia or in Korea or Okinawa picking up Marines, while you were actually in Japan by yourself, because basically I introduced you to all of my friends, but we were all on the same ship. So like when the ship would get underway, you would basically have no one left. What was that
Yeah.
like?
So it was like, as soon as I got there, we were having so much fun because you were important. People are in high spirits, and we were enjoying. But then, yeah, every person I knew left on the same day. That was really hard for me at first, because if you're not raised in that military family, you're not as good as goodbyes as like military people are. They're just like, bye. And then you leave and you're like, wait. So I was a little bit heartbroken at first, but it created so much independence in me because I didn't have a friend, like a Japanese friend, for about 6 months of me being there. So I had to be really okay with who I was. I had to be like, oh, Lenise, you're fun. You can hang out with yourself. You can go explore new things alone. You can go to restaurants alone. And that has just created so much independence in my life. And yeah, just taught me more about myself. And it allowed me to be more grounded at the time because I didn't have a million people calling me, go here, do this, do that. It was just me. I relied only on me. And I'm just really thankful for that, because I think that changed really who I am today and how strong I can be.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the best places that could happen, because as I always say, like living in Japan was the most, like the place where I actually walked out with no fear at all. Like
Mm-hmm.
literally if someone was like, go into that dark alley over there, like I would have just walked right in without any questions asked. And there was
Yeah.
just not like a lot, like there weren't as many of the same fears as you have if you're in a city in America, like in downtown or at late at night after the bars close. Like there was no feelings, like we would walk back from places at like 4 a.m. and not have a fear in the world. And that was such a different, I mean, culturally so different, but then like such a different dynamic because we just live so differently there. We didn't lock our houses, we didn't ever lock our cars. Like, yeah, there was just no, there wasn't a lot of security problems. Like we didn't have to worry because it was just always good and well, and like people took care of everyone and like never stole from you. It was like so crazy, the crime so low.
Oh, absolutely. And there's multiple times
Except your bike.
what?
My
Oh
bike.
yeah. That was a relief though. I moved to an apartment that was on a main road, and like it was the funniest story ever because I would never lock my bike, and the policeman would put notes on my bike that was like, lock your bike. And then I kept ignoring them, and they literally like twisty tied a lock to my bike and was like, here, take this free lock and lock your bike. And I was like, where would you live where the policemen give you the free lock to lock your bike? But eventually it did get stolen. But I think what happened, it was probably like a high schooler who just literally wanted to ride from where it was parked to the station and was like, all right, let me just hijack this for a minute. But I was like, well, that's just one less thing. So I didn't have to like worry about it later, because I ended up, the bus became more proficient for me. So I was like, it's okay. It was pretty heavy. So
And
gone.
we lived in Sasebo, which is actually on the most southern island of Japan, on Kyushu Island. So
Mm-hmm.
it's very different. This is not Tokyo. This is not, the major cities and where all the tourists are. This is like rice paddies, and most of the Japanese people don't speak English.
Yeah, definitely different. Like, yeah, if you're in near Osaka, Kyoto, Tokyo, any of those, there's just a more heavy, like a international presence there. But where we were, people were familiar with the military presence there. But yeah, when you got kind of a little, even like 20-30 minutes out, you were definitely using sign language to communicate if you weren't going to be pretty proficient in Japanese.
So my roommate on the ship, her name was Krista. She was the navigator. I was the auxiliaries officer on board the Germantown. And Krista and I were very good friends, which is kind of crazy because usually on a ship, even when you are good friends with people, like I don't know, tensions are high, but for whatever reasons, like we clicked instantly and like we're the best of friends and it was totally fine. So we hung out all the time off the ship, and you and her, I think, met Taka and Keiko. So Taka and Keiko basically became our Japanese mom and dad while we were in Japan, and ended up later helping out because when I was transferring and then when Krista transferred, Linny, you stayed for 4 years. So we needed someone to sponsor you to get an apartment because they don't just let, even though you had residency at that point, you couldn't just live there. So yeah, like we were hanging. So Taka, he's an entrepreneur that owned a lot of different businesses. He owned different establishments. He managed two of the bars that a lot of the Americans would go to. And we met him like playing guitar, right? Or I don't know what the first night was.
Yeah.
I think I met him the second night, but he was always playing a guitar by the end of the night. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, and he was a pretty life-changing person in your life specifically, but in all of our lives, because we got to enjoy Sasebo kind of at the mayor level because he knew everyone in the city, and then we got to go and attend events that he was planning and throwing, which was really phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah. Just the whole dynamic of him and his wife. She actually got married at 19 to an American sailor and moved to Florida for 13, 14 years and had 3 kids there, and then moved back and met him, and they have a kid of their own. So it's like a combined family. And then watching him as a businessman, all the things he got to do, and then also taking on her 3 kids, like they're just this incredible story in their own right. But yeah, Keiko was just such a mom. She was willing to co-sign my apartment with me, and like if I wouldn't have had her, then I wouldn't have been able to get the apartment I wanted and stay there. I might have had to live on this small island that I was working on, but I wanted that true authentic like Japanese feeling. So I was like, I want to live in this city, please. So I'm so lucky to have her, because I was like, wow, I didn't even know if my mom would sign with me. And we always laugh about that. But she was just a godsend, and she's just so caring and giving. And it was like those were some of the best connections. And from meeting them, I always think you never know who you're going to meet. So that's why everywhere I go, I'm meeting new people, because you never know who you can learn from, who can change your life, all of it.
Yeah, and I think we forgot to mention, but basically through someone I had a connection with in the Navy, you were able to get a job within 90 days, even though we were
Mm-hmm.
flying by the seat of our pants with this, like not
Mm-hmm.
knowing. And you
Yeah.
worked on an island, Oshima Shipyard, which is one of the largest producers of merchant ships every year. And you were teaching basically all of the workers their English.
Yeah, so not all the workers, because there's a couple thousand, but all of the high level, like maybe accountants, people that were any of the engineers or naval architects, they had to do all their technical negotiation in English. So taught them, and it definitely was such a good experience. And it was really interesting to work for a Japanese company, learn the dynamics of how that is, because the work ethic in Japan is definitely top notch, but then there's an underlying kind of negative side to that as well, just with like overworking sometimes. There's always a fine balance, and that's what I'm looking for now in my life, where you're working towards something purposeful and meaningful, but you're not like overworking just for the sake of working. But it was a really cool experience. And the only thing I found out was that whenever Taka and Keiko, they own different bars, I was able to take them over for them, because I had already been teaching English for 5 years. Because my degree's in mathematics, the English teaching was great, but it didn't maybe stimulate me enough at the end. Like I was ready to move on at that time, because basically all I had to do was converse every single day. And eventually, after years of doing that, you're like, okay, I'm ready for a change.
Yeah, and I was there. So you came within 3 weeks of me arriving for my 2 year tour. I was there for 2 years on board the Germantown. Then I left. Crystal left within 6 months because she got there 6 months after me. And then you were there for another 4 years. So you were there for 6 years in total without me, or really, because at that point, like everyone on the ship was turning over, like had already left to go back to the States or gotten another job somewhere.
Right. I think I emotionally grew a lot at that time as well, because everyone I knew left as well. So I had to get a lot better at goodbyes. And I was like, wow, this is kind of like the military style. That was very eye-opening for me because we obviously weren't raised like that. But yeah, now and then also it's real funny because you've had some other friends who I had met here in America that then would show up in Japan, or they would be in Italy with you. And I was like, man, people say that the Navy is a small community, but I'd be like, I can't even get away from these people. Like not that I was trying to, but we would always joke about that when we'd run into certain people. And I was like, man, like you never know who you're going to meet later on again. And now I'm living in San Diego. So Krista actually was just here last weekend for business. And I'm like, yes, I live somewhere where people are going to come through and I can see people that we had met or had great times with. And yeah, that's lucky.
I mean, so like I left Japan and I went to live in Italy, and I met a girl there named Mary who was a couple months later getting stationed in Sasebo. And so I told her, I was like, well, my sister's there. And actually that's how you have your boyfriend right now, because you met him through Mary.
Yeah. So Mary met my boyfriend and they would go hiking and do certain outdoor things together, and she had kept inviting me and I was like, I'm busy, and then finally I went, and then yeah, it was like the rest was kind of history. The first day we met, then we were able to kind of build a better relationship, and I felt like that was such a great way to meet a significant other, where it was like, it wasn't at a bar or online or something, not that that's wrong but any means, but it was just very organic and very easygoing, and I was really happy about that.
And we really did live like we had such a good time. Because there was Harshit and Keshup and Faizan, who were Indians that worked at Oshima Shipyards. They did I think Harshit was designing the propellers for the ships.
He was doing the hull construction.
Yeah. And they would come, they all lived actually on Oshima Island, but they would come over and hang out with us during the days and stuff. Then we had the military, Krista, and all the people we met, because in Sasebo, there's only a couple ships. There's there is a big deck amphib, and then usually two smaller amphibs like LSD, LPD, and then a couple of minesweeps. We knew people from basically all the ships. We met this guy named Jared and we ended up going to Karatsu to the autumn festival.
My God, I forgot about that.
Yeah, yes. Which is so crazy because
that was Okunchi is the festival that was. Yeah, that was a wild. They make
Jared had met a Japanese woman named Chi, right? And then we went with her, and because she knew everyone there, I think it was part of her where she grew up. Yeah, we were welcomed in just from house to house. What an amazing day we had. We were one of the only few foreigners that were at this festival, and they had so each neighborhood is called a cho, and they each had this giant float that they pull by ropes, and they wear these what's it called, the silk,
those are actually called happy jackets. It's kind of funny, but yeah, it's just they have the headbands around their head, and they wear the happy coats is what they're actually called, but they pull those floats manually. Yes. It's wild to watch.
To the beat of a drum. The guy on the top, the honored person of the year, beats the drum, and then they have to pull the float through the city based on that. And we were welcomed in just from house to house. I think we went to 10 houses. And we ended up at a restaurant that was they owned, it was the owners of the restaurant. So no one was there. It was closed for the holiday, but they had buried a fish for 3 days, and we were eating it there. I remember.
Well, I would like to say that I mean, I don't know, maybe Europe, but I might be biased, but I don't think hospitality until you go to Asia and get Asian hospitality, where people are oh no, you come in and sleep on my bed, I'll sleep on the floor, or here, eat this ridiculously. They had those huge fish, and one of my first ever stories, which I was so mad at you, but they had what's called sazai, which is a snail. It translates to turban shell in English, which just sounds bad, but it had a hard foot on it, and you literally had to peel off this hard foot, and then you would eat the sazai, but it's actually very bitter. I did not know that. And there's never any napkins. There's never anything on like the Japanese table. And you jokingly acted like you were eating it. And you were like, tasty. So I was like, okay, like, you know, when in Rome, I'll just be polite and do this. So when I put it in my mouth that second, I was like, Mayday. Like I knew I was going down and like I didn't want to spit it out and like cause this scene. So I was like panicking and I was trying to drink that tea and I was like, oh my gosh. And I like was fanning my mouth, but everyone was looking and I didn't want to like offend anyone. And I ended up spitting it out into like a little tissue. But I was so embarrassed. And I was like, when we left, I was like, Cassie, I'm going to kill you.
I mean, it tasted pretty bad, but I think I swallowed it in one swallow. So I just was like able to be like, yeah, it was totally fine.
And later on, I enjoyed those later on. But, you know, when you start off, you're kind of got to do baby steps for some of the food there.
I mean, and then Jared, and he was the DCA, which is the damage control assistant on board the Guardian Minesweeper. And then later they ended up running aground on a coral reef, and oh gosh, it was a total disaster. And I remember him getting interviewed about that because basically the ship was like wrecked on a coral reef and they had to swim out it's kind of crazy, like so many crazy stories. But Krista and you and I, like, we took that train to Nagasaki the one time to go to some festival, and we were telling stories and laughing so hard. And the entire train car was just like, it was a bunch of Japanese schoolgirls just laughing so hard because I think we were being too outrageous. But we were like, I don't know if anyone's ever had a chew high, but we were going a little ham on the chew highs. They are alcoholic. We had set up a bar on the window of the train.
Yeah, I learned later on, like in hindsight, that was noise pollution, which we never talk about that in America. Like we were maybe being a little bit too loud at the time. We weren't doing anything wrong. We just literally were laughing, and our laugh was contagious. So the high school girls all started laughing, and they were just like cracking up. And then we tried to open a window, which we found out later on, you like can't open the window on the train. Like you just can't touch anything. You can't do anything naughty, but what a great way to travel. I mean, so comfortable. That was great.
Yeah, definitely just a lot of memories. I mean, I feel like you remember more things than I do because I feel like there's so many things that have happened since then, but yeah, so much fun. And so I left, and then Taka and Keiko became a big presence in your life. You started managing two of Taka's bars that are geared towards like the Americans that were living there. So G-Rock and Jumble. And what was that like?
So like the transition to get there, I realized that I kind of had adopted that Japanese mindset of that really serious work ethic, because I had 2 English teaching jobs. So I would teach at the shipyard, and then I would come back on the ferry port, go to another school, teach children. And then on Friday nights, I would work at the bar until 3 or 4 in the morning. So I was working like these 16, 17-hour days, and it didn't even make me flinch. Like I felt like I wasn't doing enough because of how hard people work there and how long they work. But it eventually transitioned to where Taka was like, hey, do you just want to take over this full time? I was a bit nervous, of course, because I think sometimes we get comfortable, which is the worst place to be. But I was worried about leaving the shipyard, and that was a steady job. But I took that leap, just kind of like taking the leap of moving to Japan in the first place. And I started managing them full time. I was on like a normal salary. And yeah, Taka and Keiko trusted me, which was great, because I do think when you own businesses, it's really hard to find someone you trust. But I was in charge of everything. It was hiring, firing, event planning. We did a total renovation, all the logistics of alcohol coming and going. I had to set up everything behind the scenes. I hired bouncers. I got DJ. We just transformed everything. I think the sales increased by 60 to 70%. And like Taka he's such a presence. He's a musician. He's a crowd pleaser. So like he had helped in the beginning, but then I ended up taking over, and it was booming, and it taught me so much that it's paying dividends into my life now as well. Just basically, I was an entrepreneur there, taking over those clubs. and focusing more on the bigger picture rather than just being a worker focusing on one individual task.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we do lack is really good mentorship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I definitely think that that's like something that, first of all, like, you know, people seeking out mentors, but then also people just knowing that someone needs a little guidance and that they could be a really good person to give that guidance to them. In the military, they do focus on mentorship and mentors, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it doesn't feel the same. And I do know people that have been very impacted by having a very good mentor,
Yeah.
but I do think that they're like, just in general in life, like people should be seeking out, or other people should be offering like some of their own mentorship to younger people. And I think that is something that's missing in the mainstream. I think people
Yeah.
do have it, but I don't think everyone does.
I think people are definitely getting a lot more open-minded to that, because essentially what having a mentor does is it fast tracks you. That doesn't mean the path is easy. That doesn't mean that it's not going to take a significant amount of effort and time, but they can kind of guide you along. It's as if you're in a corn maze and they're up above you being like, turn right, turn left, turn right, stop, reverse. So it just helps you, like someone who has walked the path that you want to walk, seek out those people. And when it comes to mentorship though, I don't think that mentors should be out there trying to seek out a whole bunch of people. Like, you need to go to them. You need to have that humble spirit of like, hey, how can I pick your brain? How could I get around you? I mean, I wasn't as aware of mentorship at the time, but what Taka and Keiko gave me is they gave me a really powerful association. When you get around people that are living your life, maybe what you would want 5 years down the road, stay around those people. When you get around people that are moving so fast forward that you're like, crap, I feel like I'm doing so much and I'm getting left behind, like pursue those people, because that's what helps you move ahead. And then it keeps the mirror in front of your face. Like, you don't want to be the smartest person in the room. You don't want to be like, oh well, I'm doing good because all my other friends are back here. Like, you're comparing to a lower standard. Like, get around people that are ahead of you and compare yourself to that so that it pushes you forward. But yeah, getting around Taka, like he told me when I was there, he's like, you know, making money is the easiest thing. I was like, what? I was like, said no one ever. And then he's like, you know, as long as you're just trading time for money, that's all you're doing. And I was like, nah, because I was really young. I was naive. I couldn't understand. And he's like, you don't have to do that. Like, you can find different ways. You can kind of take ownership of things. You can think differently. And that has changed me so much, because success is more so a mindset than it is anything else, I believe.
Yeah, and one of his other businesses is that he figured out a way to, basically, he buys books that are being given away for free. So he gets them practically free, and then he puts them in warehouses, and he has an automated system that then, like, it's like buying books on Amazon online sort of situation.
Mm-hmm.
It's not exact, but then he makes money basically on books that were thrown away.
Yeah, so in the beginning, it was like that. It depends on what prefecture you're in and where you're at. He was buying like a milk carton size for like 10 cents, which, like, obviously he's evolved into CDs, but he's also moved his warehouse to Ibaraki. So he's kind of right outside of Tokyo now. But I think he said right now he's probably the #5 distributor of used books in Japan. So like, it's funny because that was a mindset shift as well. Like, people want to have that glamorous job, or like people be like, oh, real estate sounds so cool. But when they first started buying the books, the people around them would call them trash pickers. But you know, the first year the revenues were in the millions of, like, just with books sold, not maybe with total gross revenue. But that was funny, because if they would have taken that criticism and been like, oh my gosh, people think we're trash pickers, that could have changed them. But like, when you're out there doing something that you really want to do, you have to be prepared for people are always going to say something. And like, there's a lot of cheap seats these days. And I always think about that, because I heard someone recently say, which it was actually John Maxwell, he's like, hey, why don't you put your hot dog down and get in the game? Like, there's a lot of people out there criticizing you, but they're just sitting in the stands eating a hot dog. They're not really down there on the field playing. So I took that into my life. Like, I want to be a player in life. I want to be pursuing new things. I want to be like leading my family to a better destination, not just eating the hot dog.
And if you listen to any of the Motivational Mondays, you know that John Maxwell is definitely a person that I use his quotes a lot. And Lenise, who introduced me to him. In fact, in November, we did his leadership course, which was like
leadership.
Well, leadership, but
Yeah.
well, that's the book.
Yes, it's not his newest book out, but it came out last year. It's Leadership, and it literally is mind-blowing because he already has the best ideas ever, and then he takes these best ideas ever and makes them even better. And that's why I love him, because he is just hashtag growth, like growth. And he talked about goal setting and how goal setting is a finite game, and if you're just focused on growth, that's infinite. You can do that forever. You never want to like reach a finish line and be like, I made it, I crossed the finish line, I'm done. Because like we still got life to live, like live your life and don't get it confused with not living your life. Like keep it going forever.
Well, that's also the confusion, because I do think that you have big ideas in mind, but then if you do reach those ideas and that was all you had at the top, like then there's that moment where you're like, well, I did great, but now what?
Yeah. And I think that's where a mentor does come into play, because a mentor would be ahead of you still. And yeah, John, I was just listening to John Maxwell today, and he was like, I have ideas that are bigger than Mount Everest. And he's like, some people are like, well, what's bigger than Mount Everest? And he's like, hang around me, because my vision is so big that it blows people's minds. But why not reach for the stars? Why not have that bigger vision? And like, even if you only got halfway, hey, that's probably a lot farther than you ever thought you were going to get. But that's why you need to seek out those people in your life, because you also want people that will speak candidly to you, be honest and frank, and be like, hey, is this something you considered? Or, this is where I was, but now I'm going this direction. And just kind of like, help you see things through a different lens. That's helped me a lot.
Yeah, and we are very fortunate because we look at things through different lenses, but we also have had the different cultures to push us to see things totally differently, which is very different. Because I mean, there's still a lot of people definitely in our hometown that haven't left very often, or haven't gone very far, which is totally fine. Like, and they're very successful, like they're doing fine, but it's just getting out of that one place can change your entire view on the world and what's going on around you. And also like just different cultures, different people, it just makes such a big difference in your life. I really believe that.
Yeah, to piggyback off of that a little, not only did I gain independence by moving to Japan and doing everything, like, I mean, one of my biggest struggles, I had failed my praxis test like 5 times, I believe, and I failed my Japanese driving test 6 times. And I was like, man, I never thought there'd be a test in my life that would challenge me more than failing that praxis, because that essentially changed the trajectory of my whole career. Like I studied only mathematics then, not teaching, which I'm so thankful for. But even just passing that Japanese driving test was so hard for me. And I had to learn how to bite my tongue. I had to learn how to do everything by their rules, how to think outside the box, get help from other people. So it's just like the empathy that I learned from living abroad as well. And then also my boyfriend's originally from the Philippines, and we've had the pleasure of visiting there multiple times. But when you see how people are living that is so different than the way you were raised, you realize like, wow, like there's a lot of things I have to be thankful for. There's a lot of blessings in my life every single day, because some people aren't as fortunate for certain things, even something as simple as like pollution. We have a lot of fresh air and clean water, and we're really lucky for that in America.
Yeah, we definitely we definitely are very fortunate, and even more fortunate to be able to go out and see the different cultures and see that other ways that people live, so that you can bring that perspective back.
Yeah. And then also I'm so thankful as well, because when I moved to Japan, it was literally the day that I had turned 23. And I spent a very influential time there. It was from when I was 23 to 29. So the lessons I learned, the tradition, there's just certain things like growing up in such a small town, I was actually voted class clown. So like I had no filter, like I was never embarrassed of anything. And then when I went to Japan, I would notice sometimes when there was something embarrassing, some of my students, they would start blushing or like get red in the face. And later on, years after being around them, I would start blushing for certain things as well. So it kind of toned me down a little bit. And I feel like I was able to be a little bit more quieter and like just respectful and just really growing into a woman who could just be honorable. And, you know, not that I was doing anything that was crazy, but, you know, it made me just really mellow out, I think. And that was really good for me at that time because, yeah, professionally, it helps as well.
Plus, we just learned so much about, yeah, that way of life, especially, I mean, we had a traditional Japanese house that actually was more of a Montana ranch compared to like,
gosh.
well, compared to like everyone else's house, like they had the
Yeah.
very, very kind of like the most traditional Japanese house, whereas like our house was made of all wood, but it still had, so what's the name of the room that has like all the straw?
The tatami.
Tatami. So it was tatami mats. So it's a place that actually a lot of the time they sleep in that room, don't they? Like on the floor.
Normally, yeah, you sleep on the futon on the tatami, but yeah, you can have, we put our kotatsu table there, which just like a low table that you sit on the ground, which has a heater under it. And it's life-changing in the winter, which I'm like, why don't people in cold places in America do this as well? But
Right.
yeah, we had a tatami and then we had all wood. Yeah, just traditional style. But yeah, we had some snakes, we had some giant toads, we had some things going on. But it
Those
was cool.
giant centipedes.
Oh, mukade, yes, the worst. That's actually terrifying. And one of the things that,
we actually came home one time and one of those, the hornets that kill you if they sting you.
yeah, well, I mean, it's called a Suzumi bache. And it's funny because during COVID, as they had come to America, they're called those murder hornets. And we're like, oh,
right,
these have been in Japan for years. Like we were used to it, but they're like 3 inches long. It's pretty, I heard that one sting is like getting hit with a nail gun.
we came home after, it was like a weekend trip or something, and there was just one laying in our foyer. It was already,
from
it
New
was just
Zealand.
dead. It was just
Yeah,
dead.
We were gone for like 3 weeks in New Zealand, and we came back and
Oh,
we're
is
like,
that
what
when
is
it was?
this?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
gosh. And then I took a picture and yeah, I saw the article about murder hornets. So there was a little bit crazy insects that would, like the centipedes were like a foot long.
Yeah, and they had a hard outer shell, and you couldn't really just tramp on them. You had to boil water and pour boiling water on them. But how long would that take in a pinch? But there was special spray. But if they were poisonous, so if they bit you, like your whole finger would swell up. They were very, very terrifying. And what's funny is, like, Japanese people hate cockroaches, which the word for cockroach is gokiburi. And it's like everyone will always say that word. But now here in even California, the cockroaches seem so small compared to how big they were in Asia. So I'm not that scared anymore, because in Asia they were like 2.5 inches long, and like, oh, the gokiburi, they were terrifying. But yeah, now I can handle them better because they're so small here. We know nothing. Like the bugs in San Diego are like non-existent. It's lucky.
And a couple of times, like I definitely remember there was a place in downtown Sasebo called Lion Tower, and we used to do what's called tower roulette. So we used to get in onto the elevator and like pick a floor and try to go to like a bar in the tower, but usually they'd be like, no gaijin, like no foreigners here. So
yeah, because
we would try to get in.
What we didn't know at the time is most of those bars are what's called a snack. And a snack is where you go in for the environment to chat with women. So it's kind of like companionship. So you're able to buy them drinks. But like if we were women, we weren't going to go in and chat with the women and buy them drinks. And it's harder for them to do their job, because if they couldn't speak English, how could they kind of create the mood, you know? So we didn't understand that, but we learned.
It's all a learning experience.
Yeah.
And we really delved into Japanese cuisine.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh.
where we made like we make a lot of different foods, and I mean you specifically, but I remember when you got a tomoyaki machine and we made that.
Takoyaki, yeah.
Or
Taco is
takoyaki.
octopus. Octopus, yeah. And it's kind of like almost a pancake batter, but it's like a griddle that's shaped half as a circle. So when you twirl it around, it creates a circle and you can make it at home. It's actually really fun. But we played roulette with that as well. One of them we put wasabi and hot sauce in so that one person was going to eat it. And that's always a fun time. Yeah.
So we definitely, there was just so much culture all around us. And I think that really made, because I mean, even we used to run through Archo, which I live like kind of up on a hill. So like we'd run to the bottom and then we'd like stop in, and we found the there was a Japanese man who owned a really tiny bar that was a tribute to Elvis. Like he loved Elvis. And everything in there was just like Elvis, like Elvis jukebox, Elvis paintings on the wall, like all these things. Yeah. And he, I don't remember the term for this. I feel like I've forgotten so much, but like he had a fish tank there and you would pick a fish and then he would fillet it for you. And so like when you would eat it, the fish's mouth would be opening and closing while you're eating it.
Yeah, it's like the only thing that would be left is the skeleton. So you'd have the head and the tail with no meat because he cut out the meat to make sashimi. But yeah, that fish was called aji. So it's like aji sashimi is what we had. But oh my gosh, talk about fresh. I mean, you literally don't get any fresher than scooping it out of the tank and cutting the meat right off. And later on, after you had left, I have done that a lot with Ika, which is squid. And they essentially, you have the top of the squid and the tentacles, and then the whole middle is cut up what you eat it. But while you're eating it, the tentacles are still moving around. And then later on, you give it back to them and they cut it up and they make tempura out of the rest of it. So then you eat the tentacles later, essentially as calamari. But yeah, like I had learned a lot more after you left, unfortunately, but just with oysters and the different, there's so many, just a variety of foods that are so good there.
And Sasebo has what's called the 99 Islands, where it's just like a vista of all these islands, like out in the water there. And they have every year an oyster festival where you actually, when you go to the festival, you put the fire pit. It's like almost like a fire pit with a grate over it, and then you get like a bag of oysters, and then you actually cook them like outside around this fire in the ground. And we would go to that every year, and they'd have squid that was hanging from like a line,
a drying rack.
Yeah, it's like a drying rack, but it rotates so that none of the bugs get stuck on it.
They were kind of like flapping around like kites. Yeah, it was really funny.
So just such a different experience. And then also like, because, I was in the military there, and well, you weren't, but like we just had like so much more opportunities, I feel like, because we were actually getting paid to live abroad, which is very different than the norm of like barely getting enough money to go by, or like not having a steady salary, like because usually when you're traveling or living abroad, you're traveling
you're skimping as much as possible,
or staying in hostels. Like I've done all of that, or working in hostels just to stay at a hostel for free, like depending on what you're doing and how long you're doing it for. So like that was really fortunate because we were able to like really delve into the culture and like experience things.
Yeah, and definitely I would say, I mean, I got real lucky. By the end of the time living there, I was really living the high life, because I even had like a little bit of an allowance to take clients out when I was managing the bars and everything. And then you meet so many other people. Like, when I first was there, I had no friends. And like, that's why I was like, you know what, if I could create such a network in Japan, and by the time I was leaving, so many people knew me because all the business owners around there knew me, and the shipyard was thousands of people who knew me. Like, it was just, no matter where I went, people knew me, and like, it's fun. I was like, wow, I never thought that living here, I could create such a, like, I guess, good life and such a large network. But yeah, that just changed everything. It was cool.
And it's just like even cooler because our friendship with Krista, like you just saw her 2 days ago, a day ago, and I'm gonna see her in a week.
I have a Japanese girlfriend that's one of my best friends, and she when she got married, she did her honeymoon in Hawaii, and then she
Nodoka.
convinced her, yeah, Nodoka, she convinced her husband to honeymoon here in San Diego. So she came, and I was like, wow, I realized that I made some really lifelong friends there, because I have some hometown friends from Pennsylvania that haven't even been able to get the opportunity to visit here. And I was like, she came the whole way from Japan. Like she's a ride or die type of friend. And yeah, just so thankful to meet her, and just obviously Taka and Keiko. Those are going to be people, like, they've had so much influence on me, because Nodoka was actually my first friend that ever invited me anywhere, and it was her who opened that floodgate that introduced me to new people, who then introduced me to new people. And that's why I never take it for granted where I am and who I'm around, because that, you got to put yourself out there. You have to start up conversations. You have to take interest in other people to then all of a sudden become friends. You know, a lot of people as adults have trouble finding friends, but people are everywhere.
And one day, like, we have high hopes that we'll see Taka and Keiko again. Like, they were,
Oh, yeah.
so Krista got married last year. I was in her wedding. They were invited, and then COVID was happening, all that craziness. So hopefully there's a time where we all get together for like a reunion. And we called ourselves, like, so me, Lenny, Krista, and Keiko, we were known as the Wolf Pack.
Yeah.
So we used to go on
four girl wolf pack. Yeah, we had so much fun.
I know, I almost said Taka, but I knew that wasn't right. Yeah,
no boys allowed.
So 2 years ago you moved to San Diego.
Yeah. So I had met Carl, and we got to live there together for 3 years, which was just really nice, but it was also kind of a bubble that we were in. We got to travel. It was almost like we were on a 3-year honeymoon. But he's in the Navy as well, and his job was changing. He was like, I'm gonna choose San Diego. And I was like, okay, like, I've been out of the country for a while, and I was actually starting to get pretty deep into business with Taka, because he really liked working with me, and there was just more opportunity where I was like, all right, either I'm going to go back now to America and kind of settle down there and maybe get married, you know, start a family, or I'm going to stay here in Japan forever. Like, it was kind of like a pivotal moment as well where I had to choose. But since we're from the East Coast, this is a new adventure, and man, San Diego has been a dream come true. This is a great place to be.
Yeah, and you had to struggle at first, like looking for jobs and all that, but now you work for SPAWAR, which is the Special Warfare Command for the Navy. Yes. In San Diego as a contractor. So that's pretty good.
Yeah. And that was hard, because moving here, I learned, like, you know, I went to school, I got a degree, I was running these businesses abroad. Like, when you're like almost the owner, I wasn't the owner, but I was running them. You're making all the choices. You're kicking people out. You're like doing all the stuff that it's your way or no way, you know? And so when I got here, I was like, I got experience. Like, this is going to be easy. And like, crickets were chirping. I was putting out my resume, and I figured out at that time that we put a lot of emphasis on what we do rather than who we are. Like, when people meet you, they're just like, oh, who are you? Okay, what do you do? And like, if you don't have something to say at that time, you might not feel as good about yourself. But I am proud of myself, because I started off teaching English online at like 4 a.m. It was only in like really early morning hours. And then at nighttime, I would drive Uber. And a lot of people would be like, oh my God, you're the first female Uber driver I've ever had. But I was like, you know what? I do have that spirit where, like, you're going to make it work no matter what. Like, we're in America. Like, there's opportunity here. You can, I take my recycles and get paid. Like, there's opportunity everywhere. And it's the way that you see everything is, you know, what you're going to grab at.
Right. And so that's why, like, I would argue both of us have been through different pivotal moments in life, and then we consistently are trying to be visionaries or look at big ideas and dream even bigger dreams, because we definitely have high hopes of, like, doing something really big in our lives.
Yeah. And I think whenever you're talking about doing something big, for me specifically, it's having that impact. I heard someone talking recently, and it just really resonated with me. It was like, you know, first comes survival. So if you're in survival mode, you got to pay your bills, you got to eat. But after you move past survival, you move into success. And a lot of people think, oh, when I have that big house, when I have that nice car, I'm going to just be happy. Like everything will be happy. But when you get there, it might not be as good as you thought it was going to be. And you're like, this is it. But when you move past success, you move into the realm of significance. And that's where you can bring other people along with you. That's where maybe mentorship comes into play. And like, you know, you're able to help people learn the things that you were learning, or help them navigate certain paths, or just like, you know, change people's lives for the better. So that's where I want to get to, more so significance rather than just going after success, I guess, monetary success.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And I think that is because I consistently look at, and I've been reading nonfiction books, and I'm staying in the realm of like people who have done really big things, and almost all of the, I guess, if you even want to say celebrities or just people of prominence, they all become philanthropists, because I think that to get to a high place, like then to be fulfilling, you want to help other people, because what is it if you have all this and you're not like helping people? And I also think, you know, like I look at so many people who want to live on acres of land or have like secluded houses and those types of things. Like that's definitely what I am looking for in my future, because I don't know, it just, to live on the land, like get back to nature, like it just seems like we have such a disconnect, so, you know, today, because of how we live in concrete buildings and we're not like always in the woods. And it's just, I think a big focus of like definitely helping people and getting into nature. Those are like two of my big things that I'm always thinking about.
Yeah, and there's a whole Japanese philosophy that's called like nature bathing. And it's just like how you can kind of bring, like a lot of people are having plants inside their homes because they want that greenery, or like how can you go outside and detach, and just kind of reconnect with nature. And I realized like there, walking in the woods there, you really would get a different feeling. And one thing that you and I didn't get to experience as much, which I was really sad about later on, was the onsens, which is like the geothermal spas there, because you have a lot of geothermal activity from volcanoes. But like when you could go and soak your body, and like, you know, you would get naked, like girls were on one side, men were on the other side, but like they had outdoor baths where you could sit in them and just look at the nature view outside. Like nothing had made me feel more grounded than that. And I thought, man, no matter what I was going through in life, if I could come back and go to this onsen and like just regroup and get that wellness. I realized like in America, we kind of like, I don't know what we do specifically for wellness, but that's something you have to like reconnect. Yeah. And like maybe take a bath, be able to soak, go to a spa, do something where it like just gets your blood flowing and that circulation and just being around nature. That's why I love San Diego so much. We have beaches here, we have hiking trails, we have mountains, you can do it all. But yeah, Japan really like imprinted that on me, where you have to like touch back with nature and just kind of breathe in that fresh air.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, definitely all of that's true. And I mean, going up to Finland and like visiting Helsinki, everyone has like the saunas. And in
Yes.
Italy, and in Italy they have saunas everywhere and geothermal spas. And I also agree, like you should be putting your body like as part of your regimen, like that should be a regular thing that you're doing.
Yeah, the Japanese term is Shinrin Yoku, and it's called forest bathing. I love that. Yeah.
Well, Lenny, thank you so much for sitting down and having this conversation. We're going to start wrapping things up.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. That was such a pleasure. Thank you.
You are welcome. So the way I've been wrapping up the episodes is I have a would you rather question, and I have one final question that we can discuss. So for your would you rather question, it is, would you rather explore space or the ocean?
Oh, that's a really good one. For me personally, I would choose the ocean just because I
Playing it
recently,
safe. playing it safe.
Yeah. Safe, just like, what if you lose your helmet in space? I don't know. But plus, what do you see when you're out there? Like, there's so much space, there might be nothing but the ocean. Well, I did get my scuba diving license, and like, it really is a whole new world. Like, it's like Ariel said, and there's so much to see and so many things moving around. Plus, I love water. So yeah, ocean for me.
Ocean. Okay. And then what are 3 words that describe what you embody and how do they represent you?
3 words that represent me. I chose compassion, ambition, and open-minded. I don't know if that's open-mindedness, I guess.
You can do that. There's
Compassion.
no rules. There's no rules on this podcast.
As long as there's no rules. Compassion for me is, I feel like God always gave me a heart for others. Like, I love being around people. I have that sanguine personality, but compassion to me is just having empathy and then being able to like see things through another lens, like respect people for where they're at, even if it's different than my views. That's fine. I still respect you. I'll have compassion for you. Ambition for me, I'm learning a lot about this as I'm pursuing new doors in my life, but like, ambition is action. You can't be the person just talking forever. Like, it's the action and the follow through. So I would like to believe that I'm ambitious and that I see things before others do. And if there's a problem, I'll fix it and get on it right away without being told. That's ambition to me. And then just open-minded. It was actually Keiko who told me that like, so many people are living life in a jail cell that they created because they're closed-minded. Essentially, being closed-minded is like putting yourself in a jail cell and throwing away the key. So being open-minded to me is like allowing myself to dream big. Like, we normally limit ourselves. We put up the boundaries. We'd be like, oh, we could never do that or this, or they wouldn't like me. Like, no, break down all those barriers. Like, just be open-minded and believe in yourself and just allow yourself to dream bigger than you ever have, because it's life-changing.
Well, those are 3 very good answers. And I definitely agree, especially with the ambition and being ambitious, because I don't know. I mean, that's the difference between the doers and the non-doers. Honestly,
Yep.
like just waking up every day with the mindset, like you have to be in the right mindset. And it's okay not to be like pushing every single day, but like that has to be the majority of your time, of like setting your goals, figuring out what you need to do to meet those requirements, moving on, getting up the ladder. Otherwise, I mean, without ambition, how do you get to the top?
Yeah. And I think that consistency plays along with that. I think sometimes people will see here like, oh, they created success so fast. Like, yeah, your journey might not be the same, but like, it's taking that one little step forward every single day. And like, to me, that's ambition. Because, even if it's making one little phone call or reading 10 minutes out of a book, at least you did something to move forward, rather than being like, oh, well, I didn't move 20 steps today, so I can't do anything. Like, no, don't have that attitude. Like, be like, okay, what's at least one thing I can do? And I'm adopting that in my own life and in the habits that I'm creating, because you got to keep it moving forward. You got to keep going.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely do. And that's a really good perspective. Just the baby steps forward, just don't move backwards.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where we'll leave this episode. So this is the Always Believer podcast season 2. Ariadna has a bunch of things. If you go to the Always Believer on Instagram, Linny is not really on social media a lot. We were just hanging out having this question. So if you have any questions, you can leave them on the Always Believer podcast and we can answer them there. Also in the link on the Always Believer Instagram, you'll find a bunch of links to the merchandise that's for sale, the Latina podcast, which is Ariadna's other podcast, and also the King Po Myers podcast, which Ariadna does with her husband. So you can find everything there. I'm at the Cassie Excursion on Instagram. And yeah, so thank you so much, Lenny, for coming. It's been a great episode. I'm so glad I was able to sit down with you. And yeah, have a great day, and we'll see you live. after the
Yeah,
show.
appreciate you having me. This was a real pleasure, and I'm glad we had the opportunity to do it. So thank you so much.
Adios.
Adios.